A man had 2 sons. And the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me this share of the inheritance that should come to me." So his father gave it to him. After a few days, he took his inheritance and departed to a distant country where he spent his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that land, and he was left in dire need. He hired himself out to one of the local farmers to tend his swine, and he longed to fill his stomach on the pods in which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? Here I am, dying of hunger. He said to himself, this is what I'll do. I'll get up, and I'll go to my father, and I'll say to my father, "Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers." So he got up and went off. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him, and filled with compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son." But his father said, "Quickly, get the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then slaughter the fattened calf, and we must have a feast. Because this son of mine was dead and now he's alive. He was lost and he's been found." Then the celebration began. Meanwhile, his older son was coming in from the field, and when he heard the sounds of the celebration, he inquired to one of the servants what it meant. And the servant said to him, "Your brother has returned, and so your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." He became angry, and when he refused to go inside, his father came out to him and pleaded with him. His son said to him, "Look, all these years I have slaved for you, and never once did I disobey your orders. Yet when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughtered the fattened calf." His father said to him, "My son, you're with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost, and now he's found." You know, the younger son and the older son, they're so different from each other, but they're exactly like us. I love this moment when the younger son realizes, he came to himself and he realized, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? Here's what I shall do. That moment, that's the moment. Here's what I'm going to do. I'll get up and go to my father. That step is so important. Now, here's why it's important. When the son comes to I don't know if you realize this, but in the parable of the prodigal son, when he asks his father for the inheritance, some people say that he's basically saying, "Dad, I can't wait for you to die. Give me the money now." That's not wrong. But there's even a worse insult that he gives to his father, where it says after a few days, he departed for a distant country. What's he saying there? What he's saying in that moment is, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm leaving the family land. I'm leaving the family. I don't want to be associated with you at all. I'm going to a distant country where no one knows you and all they know is me. In that moment when he gets up and he walks back to his father and he gives that speech, "I've sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son." Here's the big thing. He's not being hard on himself. He's telling the truth. When he says, "I no longer deserve to be called your son," he is telling the truth. He has disqualified himself. He has left his family. He has left home and he regrets it. What does a father do? When he sees him, what does a father do? He runs. He runs as fast as he can. He runs as far as he can to his son. Because why? Because his son needs to be healed. This is the reality for a lot of us tonight. We need to be healed. The Father he is in the Son. He has taken every step possible. There's only one step left. What we need is we need to be healed. The whole parable begins, Luke chapter 16, begins with Jesus saying he sees the Pharisees. And he sees people resenting those people like us who have broken hearts. And he says to them, here's the parable. Because a lot of us here tonight are the older son. A lot of us here tonight are the ones who, I stayed home. I didn't go out and do all the things I wanted to do. That's what they did. That's what my roommate did. That's what the person down the hallway did. I didn't do any of those things. I was a good kid. I was a church kid. I lead a Bible study for crying out loud, and now I'm mad about it. I said yes to discipleship, and now I resent it. Why? Because all these years I have slaved for you, and I obeyed not one of your orders. Did I disobey your orders? But you didn't rejoice in me. We have to look at our hearts right now. The younger son, he left home and regretted it. The older son stayed home and resented it. The question we have to ask is, am I one of the kids who stayed home? And now I'm mad about it. Pay attention to this. When the father hears that the older son won't come in, what does he do? He takes steps. He goes out to him. And he begs him to come inside. The younger son, he regretted it and needed to be healed. The older son resented it and he needed to be held. Some of us here tonight, that's what we need. Because we're serving, we're slaving, we're working, we're doing all the right things, but we don't know what it is to be held by the Father. Why? Because remember, all of Catholicism, all of Christianity comes down to one question. Does your Father have your permission to love you as you are? The Father says, son, come in, rejoice with us, be part of the celebration. I won't. Why? Because I do not give you permission to love me as I am. Again, that leads us to this moment. This moment is so important. God has gone as far as he can. One step remains. Your step. Your yes.